It all began when Daniel and his wife Maya moved into their new home in a peaceful suburban neighborhood managed by a strict HOA. They had worked tirelessly for years. Daniel, a former Army veteran turned mechanic, and Maya, a high school teacher, scraping every penny to afford their dream house. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest two-story with a small porch and a patch of lawn, but to them, it was a monument to their resilience. Every late-night shift at the garage, every lesson plan Maya crafted past midnight, every vacation they skipped to save a few dollars, it all led to this moment. The house stood as a symbol of their discipline, their shared dreams, and their unyielding commitment to each other. But from the moment they arrived, the neighborhood felt less like a community and more like a battlefield. Mr. Barnes, the HOA president, greeted them with a smile that never touched his eyes. His clipboard clutched like a shield. His welcoming words were clipped, his gaze assessing, as if their very presence disrupted the neighborhood's pristine order. The first sign of trouble came within days. A crisp envelope from the HOA arrived, citing their mailbox as vibrant. Red color is a violation of the community's approved palette: beige, navy, or black only. Daniel chuckled at first, thinking it a minor oversight, but Maya's frown deepened as she read the fine print. Compliance within 7 days or a $100 fine. They painted the mailbox navy, swallowing their pride, but the notices kept coming. Maya, an avid gardener, had spent weeks planting a flower bed of roses and tulips, envisioning bursts of color to brighten their mornings. The HOA disagreed, sending a letter that her unauthorized flora violated the community's preference for uniform shrubbery. Then came the final straw, a warning letter threatening a $500 fine, because Daniel had been seen fixing the neighbor's car in their driveway, a favor for Mrs. Carter, an elderly widow who couldn't afford a mechanic. The letter called it unsanctioned commercial activity. Daniel's hands trembled as he read it, not with fear, but with a quiet fury. Friends and family urged them to fight back or sell the house and leave. This place isn't worth it, Maya's sister said over the phone, but Daniel, shaped by years of military discipline, had faced tougher battles. He turned to Maya, his voice steady. We didn't come this far to run. Let's show them what community really means. The next morning, Daniel walked into the HOA Community Center, a squat building with neatly trimmed hedges and a signboard listing rules. He didn't come to argue or plead. Instead, he signed up to volunteer. The receptionist, a stern woman named Miss Hargrove, raised an eyebrow. You're the new guy with the mailbox issue, she said, her tone skeptical. Daniel just smiled. I'm here to help, not complain. He proposed a neighborhood cleanup day, offering to lead it himself. Whispers followed. Some neighbors saw it as a stunt, others as defiance. Mr. Barnes, presiding over the meeting, gave a curt nod, his lips tight. Daniel didn't care about the skepticism. He and Maya spent the weekend planning, printing flyers, and borrowing tools from Daniel's garage. On Saturday, they stood in the community park, rakes and trash bags in hand, expecting a handful of people. To their surprise, a dozen neighbors showed up, including a few curious kids and Mrs. Carter, who brought homemade lemonade. They picked up litter, weeded overgrown pots, and laughed over shared stories of moving to the neighborhood. For the first time, Daniel felt a flicker of connection, but the HOA wasn't done. Another notice arrived, this time about the height of their grass, half an inch too tall. Maya, usually the calmer of the two, slammed the letter on the kitchen table. This is personal, she said. Daniel agreed, but kept his focus. They want us to break. We won't. Instead, he doubled down on his efforts. He organized a free car maintenance workshop in the community center's parking lot, teaching neighbors how to check oil, rotate tires, and spot leaks. Maya joined in, handing out snacks and chatting with attendees. Among them was Sarah, a single mother who'd been wary of Daniel at first, assuming he was just another rule breaker stirring trouble. But as he patiently showed her how to fix a squeaky brake, she softened. You're not what I expected, she admitted. Daniel grinned. Good. I'm not here to meet expectations, I'm here to change them. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and Maya became fixtures in the neighborhood. They hosted a charity potluck, where Maya's homemade chili and cornbread drew a crowd. Neighbors who'd once hurried past their house now lingered, sharing stories of their own struggles. The kids who used to speed by on bikes now stopped to ask Daniel about his army days, or Maya about her classroom tales. Even Miss Hargrove, the HOA receptionist, started offering small smiles when Daniel dropped by with ideas for new events. But Mr. Barnes remained a wall of resistance. At every HOA meeting, he nitpicked Daniel's initiatives, citing budget concerns or community standards. Once, he interrupted Daniel's pitch for a kids' soccer league, saying, "We don't need frivolous activities disrupting our order." Daniel didn't argue. He just kept going, organizing the league anyway, with Maya coaching the kids on weekends. The sound of laughter and cheers filled the park, and even Barnes's wife, Ellen, showed up to watch, clapping as her grandson scored his first goal. The turning point came on a chilly autumn evening. Mr. Barnes's old sedan broke down on the street outside Daniel's house, its engine coughing pitifully. Daniel was in the garage, tinkering with a neighbor's lawnmower, when he saw Barnes standing by the car, looking defeated. The HOA president hesitated, then knocked on Daniel's door. "I need a favor," he muttered. Eyes on the ground, Maya, watching from the window, raised an eyebrow. But Daniel grabbed his toolbox without a word, under the street lamps. Glow. He worked for 3 hours, diagnosing a faulty alternator and rigging a temporary fix. When the engine roared back to life, Barnes stood there, rain-soaked and silent. "You didn't have to do that," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I know," Daniel replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "But that's what neighbors do. We help each other." For the first time, Barnes met his gaze, and something shifted a crack in the wall he'd built. That moment marked a change. Barnes started attending Daniel's events, at first quietly, then with more warmth. He brought his grandson to the soccer league, even helped set up tables for a community garage sale. Other neighbors noticed the shift. Sarah, now a regular at Daniel's workshops, started a book club, inviting Maya to join. Mrs. Carter organized a knitting circle, her laughter filling the community center. The neighborhood began to feel alive, not just orderly. At the next HOA election, Sarah nominated Daniel for the board. He hadn't planned to run, hadn't even considered it. "I'm just a guy who fixes cars," he told Maya, but she shook her head. "You're more than that. You're showing them what's possible." To his shock, he was elected in a landslide, with even Barnes voting in his favor. As a board member, Daniel didn't rewrite the whole rule book, but he changed how it was used. Fines became last resorts. Conversations came first. He proposed a community garden, where Maya's roses and tulips finally found a home alongside neighbors' vegetables and herbs. The mailbox rule was relaxed, letting pops of color dot the street. The neighborhood transformed, not through rebellion, but through connection. People shared meals, tools, and stories. Kids played together, their laughter echoing past bedtime. Even Barnes, once the enforcer of rigidity, hosted a barbecue, his smile finally reaching his eyes. Daniel's journey wasn't about fighting the HOA. It was about building something better. He and Maya faced skepticism, rules, and cold shoulders, but they chose action over anger, kindness over conflict. Their story reminds us that you can't control how others treat you, but you can choose how you respond. And sometimes, the most powerful change comes from quiet, consistent acts that build trust, respect, and a community that feels like home. But the story didn't end there. The neighborhood's transformation inspired others beyond its borders. A nearby community, struggling with its own rigid HOA, reached out to Daniel for advice. He shared his approach, not fighting the system, but working within it to foster connection. Maya started a blog, chronicling their journey, which gained a small but dedicated following. Readers sent messages about their own battles with HOA letters, landlords, or divided communities, and Maya responded with practical tips and encouragement. "Start small," she wrote. "A conversation, a favor, a shared meal. That's where change begins." Back in the neighborhood, new challenges arose. A developer proposed a commercial complex nearby, threatening the area's quiet charm. The HOA, now led by Daniel and a more collaborative board, organized town halls to hear residents' concerns. Sarah, now a vocal advocate, rallied neighbors to present a unified front. Even Barnes, who once would have sided with order over sentiment, spoke passionately about preserving the community's spirit. They didn't stop the development entirely, but they negotiated green spaces and traffic controls, ensuring the neighborhood retained its heart. Daniel and Maya also faced personal trials. Maya's school faced budget cuts, threatening her job. Daniel's garage saw a dip in business as a new chain opened nearby, but the community they built rallied around them. Mrs. Carter organized a fundraiser at the community center, with neighbors donating to support Maya's classroom supplies. Sarah spread the word about Daniel's garage, bringing in new customers. The kids from the soccer league even made a banner, proclaiming Daniel the neighborhood hero. Through it all, Daniel and Maya leaned on the community they'd helped create, proving that kindness flows both ways. Years later, as Daniel and Maya sat on their porch, now surrounded by a colorful garden approved by the HOA, they reflected on their journey. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, disagreements still rose, and rules still needed enforcing. But it was a place where people listened, helped, and grew together. Mr. Barnes, now retired from the HOA, stopped by with a bottle of wine, his once stiff demeanor replaced by warmth. "You changed this place," he said, raising the glass. Daniel shook his head. "We all did," he replied. "That's what makes a community." Their story spread, not as a loud protest, but as a quiet revolution. It showed that change doesn't always need megaphones or battles. Sometimes it starts with a man fixing a car, a woman planting flowers, and a couple choosing to stay, to act, to build. Daniel and Maya's legacy wasn't just a transformed neighborhood, it was a reminder that the smallest acts, done with heart, can ripple outward, creating a home where everyone belongs.